This is our homeland. Please help us, Lord. This is our homeland. Why are they raping those children? This is our homeland. Please help them, oh Lord. This is our homeland. Why are they killing the...
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Environment Grenada. I'm your host, Kadeen Francis. This show is dedicated towards the protection and preservation of our environment. For our guests today, I have two gentlemen, Mr. Philip Weech of the Bahamas and also Mr. Amjad Abdullah of the Republic of Maldives. Both gentlemen are here attending a meeting that discusses the negative effects of climate change and what small island developing states like Grenada can do collectively to ensure our survival. Mr. Weech and Mr. Abdullah, welcome. A very warm, spicy welcome to Grenada.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being in Grenada.
All right. I want to start with you, Mr. Abdullah. Now, can you tell us what exactly do you do for your government as it relates to climate change?
Well, thank you. First of all, there are a number of things that we do I and the government do for the survival of the people in the Maldives. We've started a number of programs. We've started a lot of adaptation programs, and there has been a number of programs which we, among ourselves, we have started. One of these is relocation of people from small vulnerable islands to bigger one with appropriate adaptation measures.
Now, the Republic of Maldives. It tells me that the group of 26 atolls of the Republic of Maldives encompass a territory featuring 1,192 islets, of which 200 islands are inhabited. Is that correct?
Well, yes, most of it, but not 200. We used to have 200, but we have started relocating because of the vulnerability, because of the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. People weren't able to inhabit there, and we were forced to relocate people on a safer and protected islands. So the number of inhabited islands are 194 islands at the moment.
Can you go into a bit more detail and tell us exactly how climate change has affected your country?
If you look at the horizon from the Maldives perspective, and it's one of the most vulnerable countries on the entire planet.
Wow.
Because that's purely on coral atoll islands. It's very low lying. The highest point that you can ever reach is 3 meters above mean sea level. So we, unlike other island countries, we don't have any higher grounds and we don't have any options. The options that is being put forward by the scientists is that you do nothing and the nature, adjusts itself. But people have been living inhabited in these islands, and then the option of do nothing is not an option. We can't watch because people are just next to the shore. So people's infrastructure, people's property, investments are just, on the verge of washing away. And the other option is moving back, where our island is just about, on average is a square kilometer. And there's no option for moving back. The only option is mix of protection, and providing the adequate adaptation measures.
So what is the worst case scenario if nothing is done?
Worst case scenario is, as projected by the IPCC, 80% or plus of our islands would be inundated.
Wow.
So that means you are losing an entire nation, you're losing entire culture, you're losing a group of people, who have not done anything to cause the problem.
Right. Did they give a time frame by which they predict that may happen?
Well, by end of this century, the scientists are predicting that, it may happen if we behave business as usual, if we behave as what we do now, if we don't try to reduce the greenhouse gases. That is the cause of the problem. And the cost of adaptation is going to be enormously high if we don't really start doing something now. And still there is a time if we have the political will to do it.
Right.
Yes, we can.
Mr. Weech, I'm going to ask you very similar questions. What is it you do as it relates to climate change on behalf of your government in the Bahamas?
Well, I have other responsibilities. I am the director of the Bahamas Environment, Science and Technology Commission in the Ministry of the Environment. And a part of my responsibilities deals with international conventions. And the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, is a convention that deals with the issue of climate change. So I am the lead negotiator for the Bahamas in the interactions with the international community related to climate change. In addition to myself, we have officers from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also officers from the Ministry of the Department of Meteorology, all within the Ministry of the Environment, that's responsible for dealing with the issue of climate change and the negotiations. And of course, we have the Minister of the Environment, who is also responsible for this and reports back to Cabinet on a regular basis.
The Commonwealth of the Bahamas consists of 2,387 rocks, 661 keys, and 29 islands. Am I right?
We don't usually break our numbers down in that particular way, but it's appropriate. We have islands. The third largest island in the Bahamas is in the Caribbean, is the island of Andros, which is in the Bahamas. We have big ones, small ones, narrow ones. There's a whole variety of variations. We do not have atolls, but we have islands. And the Bahamas formed at sea level. And so all of our islands are made from basically the precipitation of seawater. We have chalk, calcium carbonate, that precipitates out of the seawater. And so there is no volcanoes. There are no high hills. The highest point in the Bahamas is a place called Mount Alvernia. And Mount Alvernia is 206 feet above mean sea level, or about 60 meters above mean sea level. That is the actual highest place in the Bahamas. Like the Maldives, 80% of the Bahamas is within 1 meter of mean sea level. So the island of Andros, which is our largest island, the projections in terms of what would happen would mean that 80% of the island of Andros would simply disappear, or it would return to the sea. And the processes we're talking about is basically just a rising of sea level. Sea level at one time was also 600 feet lower. So at one point in time in geological time frames, hundreds of thousands of years, the Bahamas was a lot bigger. Climate change, global warming, those impacts now are expected to make the Bahamas much smaller.
Okay.
And it would be difficult for the people who live there to make a livelihood if large areas of lands are lost, infrastructure are lost, economic survival, which depends on the sea, access to the sea, is not facilitated.
And a similar question, what is the time frame you think that could potentially happen if nothing is done?
Well, these are the same numbers that Amjad has suggested. Within this century, towards the end of this century, if no action is taken to address the problem, the Bahamas, like the Maldives, we will become a displaced people.
Now, both of you I know are in Grenada because you're participating in the Alliance of Small Island States, or it's abbreviated AOSIS, for a preparatory meeting. Can you tell us more about that, as to the objectives of that meeting?
The Alliance of Small Island States was formed because there was a recognition among the 43 countries, now 43 countries, that we have many things in common. And that commonality means that in the international negotiation forum, we are able to better represent our views as a large group of countries than individually.
Correct.
AOSIS was formed in '92 at the Earth Summit, and it has been in existence now for 27 odd years since then, and focusing on the issues of survival for small island developing states.
Okay.
Low-lying coastal areas, LDCs that are part of the group of countries. And we have worked very, very actively in the issue of climate change, because for all of us, that is really a defining moment for all of us. If we do something about climate change, we can make a difference. If we do not do something about climate change, we all stand to lose, and we all stand to lose big time.
Let's define climate change. How would you define climate change?
Well, what we're describing is the anthropogenic effects. That is, What man has been doing since the industrialized area has led to an unnatural warming of the earth. The analogy is that you have a blanket at night on your bed.
Right.
And as long as you keep the blanket on, the warmer it will get because your body traps in that heat. Heat is being trapped into our atmosphere as a result of the release of greenhouse gases. Water vapor is the largest greenhouse gas,
Right.
but then you also have the results of the burning of fossil fuels. So 100 years ago, it was coal. Coal powered the Industrial Revolution. The effects of those gases in the atmosphere is what we are seeing now. 100 years later, the gases that were released in the atmosphere during the industrial period, it persists in the environment over long periods of time and is having its impact today. There are other gases, nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide. There are ozone depleting substances that also have a global warming potential. And so there are gases that came as a result of the